Hey there guys, welcome back to the channel. Today, as I said yesterday, we are going to be reading chapter 6 of SOULTIDE, A Benevolent, Malevolent Gift. The warnings in this chapter, trigger warnings and content warnings, are fire references, discussion of death, concept of temporary death. Grian has a panic attack and doesn't manage it well, but he hugs Scar for comfort. There's disability / chronic illness, and of course we've got ZF. Alright, if you enjoy the chapter, please feel free to drop a like on the video. Check out the original fanfic, link should be in the description if future Aqua remembers to link it. So check it out, check out Pastel on AO3. Link to their channel should also be in the description, if future Aqua remembers that, once again. Anyways, as I was saying, enjoy the chapter. I don't get why you don't want to talk to ZF, Grian, Scar was saying as they walked through the nether hub. Tango had thankfully finished the basis of the hub, mob-proofing a great deal of it, and the corridors were beginning to be established. You guys get along. He can be a little eccentric, Mumbo offered in defense of Grian. But then again, I could also be considered eccentric. Grian groaned loudly. He didn't look at his soulmates. Walking is so slow. Ugh. Grow your wings faster, Mumbo. It's not that I don't want to talk to him. I don't have anything against ZF. I just know what he wants to do, and it's stressing me out. Shoot us with an arrow and yell Hawkeye at us? Scar cracked a smile, but Grian couldn't laugh. If it bothers you that much, Mumbo and I could go to the Hole of Fame. Well, you go and work on your mega base. We don't have to be attached at the hip at all times. Last time you went off on your own while I worked on the base, you burnt down the ranch. Point taken. And why did you burn it down? Mumbo asked. Do I want to know? They stole our horse. It was just retribution. Ah, I understand completely. Grian glanced at Mumbo. It didn't look like he understood. Scar hopped forward, activating his butterfly elytra long enough to twirl and swoop in front of them. Grian didn't bat an eye when he realized Scar's current look was a mashup of his elf guise and his park ranger aesthetic from Double Life, with a large scar striking over one of his eyes. Okay, new idea. I'll fly ahead and talk to ZF about things before you guys get there. I'll make sure he gives you a heads up before doing anything. ZF is many things, but he's not mean. Well, not intentionally. The last part made Grian hunch his shoulders subconsciously. He had told himself many times that they weren't mean on purpose. They were benevolent until they weren't. His reaction must have been more obvious than he thought, because Scar's smile slipped off his face. It's just ZF, Scar tried to reassure him. It'll be okay. We'll play it by ear, okay? Mumbo and I will be right next to you, and you have my permission to rocket up and away at any point. Zed's base is really open to the sky. And well, what could Grian say to that? Thanks, Scar. Scar lit up again. No problem. That's what soulmates are for, right? With a nod from Grian, Scar shot a thumbs up at him and Mumbo before shooting off down the corridor. The turns and ashy air of the nether hub's tunnels soon swallowed him up. All right, Grian looked at Mumbo. You have that totem of undying I gave you? In response, Mumbo pulled it out of his inventory. I still can't believe Impulse is actually selling these things in his shop. I can't remember if we've ever had a raid farm on Hermitcraft. It's kind of like how you sold end crystals and obsidian last season, Grian pointed out. Tango did his mob farm magic and made a raid farm that Scar and I use for emeralds. It's definitely turning out useful right now. You really think ZF will try to kill Scar as soon as he goes through the portal? He knows we're on hardcore, right? Mumbo, I don't trust ZF or Scar not to do something that results in our deaths. Fair. Grian looked at the totem in his own hand. all shining gold and emerald. To be honest, I don't know what will happen if we die with these totems. They broke the double life mod when I was testing things. I'm guessing there's some reason you didn't bring this up earlier. Whatever's on us could make it so the totems don't work. Or it could work like it did in testing, and it'll break the soulmate bond, but this isn't the mod anymore. So there's no guarantee that's going to happen. They could be completely useless. Grian tossed the totem up in the air. For a single breath, he was vulnerable. Scar could crash into a wall or pull his elytra taut for a death drop. Or Zedaf could aim just right with an enchanted crossbow. 2 totems would pop and Grian would fall dead because of something that happened out of his reach. But that didn't happen. Grian caught the totem again, and he was still alive. The totem held an extra life, but Scar held his life. Having his life in the hands of another didn't sit right with Grian. As they stepped over the snow and into the nether portal, Grian clutched the totem in his hand, shut his eyes, and braced himself for what dangers lay in wait beyond. Riptides of purple crashed over him, the air changing to fresh and clear. The pop in his ears and the sound of water flowing told him the portal had brought them safely to the other side. No arrow or yell interrupted that. When Grian opened his eyes and stepped out of the portal, purple seeping away from the edges of his vision, he found that nobody was there to greet them. Only Mumbo was there, offering a reassuring smile and a shield. A surprise attack hadn't been what Grian had been scared of, however. He looked across the large hole in the Hole of Fame. Zedaf and Scar sat on the edge of the hole opposite them, both smiling and chatting together, which was interrupted when they noticed Grian and Mumbo at the portal. Scar waved them down, while Zedaf hopped up and started to run around the circle of the hole, looking like he wanted to ram them with his stubby pair of horns. He looks excited. See? Nothing to be afraid of, Mumbo said, and Grian didn't agree. As they watched, layered pairs of brilliant white wings snapped into existence at Zedaf's back. Grian had seen those wings enough to know they weren't elytra, but real wings and feathers like his own. But not like his own. Different. Magical. Zedaf was a ramling, not an elytrian. These white feathers were a gift, a curse he carried from server to server, unable to sever them like Grian had. Zedaf came to a stop in front of the two, throwing his arms up. A pumpkin had somehow ended up in his hand. Grian, my fellow watcher turned player, Zedaf cheered. He threw the pumpkin at Mumbo, who scrambled to catch it before it could splatter on the quartz floors. How's hardcore treating you? Grian pressed his hands together in front of his chin, staring at Zedaf for a moment. Ooh, that's a thinky face. I like it. And Mumbo! Zedaf's attention was quickly caught by Mumbo's baby wings sticking out from the back of his borrowed sweater. He was too quick for Mumbo to shy away and hide them. Natural wings, that's brilliant! You'll have to tell me how you did it. Zedaf, Grian interrupted. How many diamonds would it take for you to lend me your mask? That's right to the point. Zedaf turned serious fast at the question, and his wings shivered in visual affront. I only have the one, and they're not that easy to replace. Well, more like impossible to replace, but that's semantics. You know, you've never told me what happened to yours. I broke it before I joined Hermitcraft, Grian bluntly explained. Can I borrow yours for 5 seconds? I just want to check out this glitch, and I'll pay you. Zedaf reached into his inventory and pulled out a white crescent-shaped mask, and Grian resisted the urge to turn around and walk back through the nether portal at the sight of it. Plain white with no obvious markings. It didn't look look like anything special at first glance, but he knew what it could do and what it represented. 5 diamond blocks. Grian balked. Blocks? Just to borrow it for 5 seconds? That's my price, Zedaf confirmed, putting on the mask. It fit perfectly on his face, within the frame of his horns. You guys have giant diamond pillars at spawn. 5 blocks is a drop in the bucket for you, and it's a rather fair price, for a rather unique item, I might add. Fine, Grian reluctantly accepted. Where's your ender chest? Zedaf pointed behind them. Just in the hall behind the portal. Grian tore his eyes away from the mask, and he went to look for that ender chest, Mumbo at his heels. 5 diamond blocks for 1 item? What happened to the economy while I was gone? Mumbo asked, baffled. Ska started a diamond pillar race. We took down the pillars not long ago. Somehow, Grian could trace so much server chaos, not to himself, but to Scar. He found the ender chest without much trouble. The entire place clean of any clutter or chest monsters that were the norm in most bases. And in there awaited his diamond blocks. Grian counted out 5 blocks and closed the chest and froze. In just a moment, when he walked back out and handed Zedaf the payment, Grian would have a watcher mask in his hands again. It brought to mind the pain and the memory of betrayal, of their magic seeping into his being and trying to change him. It reminded him that his first meetings with Mumbo and Scar hadn't been for pleasant reasons, and that their first sight of him had been with wounds on his face and in the shape of that crescent mask. A hand rested on his shoulder, making him jump. Are you all right, Grian? Mumbo asked. You look pale. Grian looked at his hands, one hand in his inventory with 5 diamond blocks, one hand holding a totem, both shaking. He took a few steps back, grabbing some rockets instead of diamonds and spreading his wings. Scar had said he could dip out whenever, right? I need a few minutes. He turned and flew away. Grian didn't know where he was going. Away, his mind supplied. Anywhere but here. Even if Scar had given him permission, it didn't feel right to run away like this. Just a few minutes, he told himself, curving his flight path so that he wasn't heading in a straight shot away, while white bases peeked into the corner of his vision. He just needed a few minutes to himself, and then he would go back. The first time he met Zedaf, that mask had been there. It had been part of Zedaf's Halloween costume as Death, visiting hermits to give them a challenge. At that first meeting, it clicked for both of them that the other had a connection to the Watchers. Zedaf had rolled with it. Grian had laughed nervously and followed Zedaf's requests, too shocked and confused to question it. Back then, Grian wore one of Scar's illusions to make his face look unblemished, and that Halloween had come along soon after Scar declared his skin fully healed. When he saw that masked figure waiting for him in the shopping district, and thought this was the moment he was going to be taken away from Hermitcraft, Grian had felt guilty for asking Scar for that favor. What was the point of the cosmetic illusion if he was just going to get blood on his face again anyway? However, Zedaf turned out to just be another hermit, and Death's challenge had been just another hermit game. He was the same as Grian, all considered, and once a watcher, now a hermit. Death's challenge was simple: find a way to die as fast as possible. Back then, even in shock, Grian had locked onto a foolproof, quick death method, and he had rocketed himself up to a good height, then rocketed straight to the ground. Not quick enough, and had definitely fumbled with the rockets and his armor for too long, but it worked. Grian had feather falling on his boots now, flying high in the air. He wrenched off his boots and then his helmet. All diamond. He had lost his gear too many times this season to bother with the grind of netherite mining. So even if he lost his armor among the trees below, it wouldn't be too hard to replace. These days, he knew he didn't need rockets on the downswing. He was pretty high up now anyway. All he needed to do was tip backwards, wings flattening against his forward momentum in a sudden halt, then fall. Should we go after him? Oh, wait, I gave Grian my elytra. Right. Zedaf, do you have a spare? You are not allowed to take one from the Hall of All. Scar took his eyes off the clouds for a moment. The motions Mumbo was making were those of someone who was searching their inventory over and over for something that wasn't there. And Zedaf's magic mask, glowed with a purple tint that wasn't there a minute ago. I'll only be borrowing it. He said he needed a few minutes. Scar interrupted. I think we should let him be and wait for him to come back. He probably wants to be alone right now. Zedaf turned his mask to look at Scar. I have to say, the ties between you three are fascinating. It's a cocktail of magic. Scar tucked his totem of undying into a pocket to give him a free hand, which he waved in front of him, painting a layer of obscuring magic between him and Zedaf. Don't. You should wait until Grian's back. Zedaf pouted, but the mask fell off and into his hands. Fine. It's the hardcore part I was interested in. I didn't even think of the crossover between all your magics. I haven't left my base, you see, and I've only looked at Rendok's connection so far. Have you thought of helping out the hermits who haven't found their soulmate yet? Mumbo suggested. You've helped diagnose magical issues before, and to be honest, it's kind of scary to be in the dark about what your soulmate is doing. Right then, Scar could guess that Grian was flying. Not anywhere in particular, but flying for the sake of flying. It was the freedom that probably appealed to Grian the most to Grian. He didn't like being trapped or tied down. Scar took the totem out of his pocket and stared at the illager magic behind its glimmering emerald eyes. Grian probably didn't like someone else controlling his fate either. A sudden shock of pain brought Scar to his knees, and he saw Mumbo stumble a split second before the backlash hit the both of them, and then the totem burst in his hands. Green and yellow sparkles like confetti exploded in the air. Scar gasped with the revival magic spiking his system. His illusions rippled from the influx of magic, flickering through colors and styles as he had used in the past. And it was only thanks to the practice of using totems for shock stunts that he was able to tame his glamours back to his high elf appearance so quickly. Not quick enough, apparently, judging by how his communicator started flashing and beeping at him. Grian just popped his totem, Mumbo realized, sounding breathless. Scar looked over to see him trembling, clutching a piece of steak like his life depended on it. Need some help? Zedaf offered a hand to Scar. Your comm's beeping. Odd time to set an alarm. Scar accepted the help, and Zedaf handed him his cane. Ever prepared, Scar built a small chair from building scraps in his inventory and sat down with a sigh. It's a health alert, Scar said, finally addressing it. A few quick taps, confirming he was fine, and it stopped its nonsense. The guys upstairs keep tabs on me. Totem set it off. Once the alert was gone, he checked the chat, dreading the possibility of seeing Grian's death message. Mumbo has reached the goal post-mortal. Impulse SV. Looks like I'm going to be sitting at my raid farm for a few hours. Vintage beef. Only a few? Well, at least we know the totems work now, Mumbo said. What do you mean? Scar asked, his eyebrows going up. Grian told me he wasn't sure if totems still worked with the glitch. And he tested it without knowing if it would work? Mumbo's face fell into uncertainty as he processed that, and he looked away. I didn't think about that. Why wouldn't it work? Zedaf piped up. Totems are full of magic. They don't care about some silly game mod. Does Grian know that? Scar asked. It's an honest question. I've heard it's not obvious to many people who don't use magic. Mumbo, have you ever mentioned it to him? Mumbo shook his head. It's outside my specialization. I don't think pillagers have ever really come up in conversation, and like you said, Grian isn't a magic user. Scar went quiet, checking his communicator. The chat remained still. He couldn't stop his frown from deepening. Mumbo's face went pale, mirroring his thoughts. Maybe it was an accident? He asked, voice strained. Then why isn't he saying anything in chat? Scar, if you could lend me your elytra, I could go after him. I don't know if it's good for him to be alone or not right now. Scar snapped, his heart full of pleading and beating on the same lines as Mumbo's heart. I didn't think I'd be worrying this much when I found out he was my soulmate. Then let's go after him. Mumbo, Scar, he's our soulmate and our friend. The least we can do is make sure he's okay. Scar sighed and stood up. You're right, but I'll go by myself. I don't have more totems on me, and I don't have a spare elytra either, he added before Mumbo could protest. Mumbo looked to Zedaf, who put his hands up in surrender. Okay, I lied. I don't have an elytra in the Hall of All yet. I'm still waiting for someone to start selling them again. I'll message you as soon as I find Grian, Scar promised. Rockets in hand, he launched out of Zedaf's space and into the air, straight into... Whoa! Scar managed to swerve just in time to avoid crashing into Grian, who banked in the opposite direction. Voices shouted in a panic as Scar found himself going too fast as to attempt a quick landing. He curved his elytra wings to skim the walls of Zedaf's space, circling around to wear down his speed safely. He didn't have a totem, and they were still at half hearts after the scare. All he had on hand were cookies and a pumpkin. Somehow he had ended up with a pumpkin in his hand. He had just wound his speed down enough to land on his feet, and was just coming in to do that when Grian put himself in Scar's way at the last second. Scar stumbled into his soulmate, his legs threatening to slip out from under him, and he grappled for something to keep from falling, but the Hole of Fame's central ring had no decor to hang on to. Instead, to his surprise, Grian moved in the way, forcing Scar to lean on him. Red wings wrapped around the two of them. Grian, are you okay? Mumbo's voice reached them, and Grian's wings pulled back to raise the feathery barrier from between their third soulmate. He didn't pull away from Scar, and Scar took that as permission to lean more of his weight on him. Our totems went off, Mumbo continued, tapping the tips of his feathers together. Red sparked between them, probably without him realizing he was doing it. And then you didn't say anything in chat. Are you okay? Did you fly into something? Yeah, actually. Grian forced an awkward and sheepish chuckle. He moved so he could access his inventory without leaving Scar without a shoulder to hold on to. And he revealed a shulker box. I swung by Impulse's shop to pick up a few more totems. Mumbo wasted no time in picking out a totem for himself, and Scar transferred to his cane before grabbing one as well. He whistled when he saw the inside of the shulker box. You must have cleared out the place, Scar commented, taking an extra few for the road. How much did this cost you? Grian shrugged and grinned. What can I say? The economy's broken. Speaking of our shambling economy, Zedaf interrupted, hopping back into the scene. He held out a hand. 5 diamond blocks, please. Grian handed over the payment. With a flourish, Zedaf presented the white crescent mask. You are not allowed to leave the premises with that, was his only stipulation. Do your watching and give it right back. Eyes watching curiously, the mask passed his hands. Grian's eyes disappeared behind it as he put it on. Zedaf, you never let anyone touch your mask, Mumbo brought up. The underlying question was in Scar's mind as well, but it felt like the answer was already there, right in front of them. He just couldn't place his finger on what it was. Grian was the one to answer, looking at the other hermits, seeming to stare deeply at each one through the opaque mask. The mask glowed with purple at certain angles, Scar realized, reminding him of how he could sometimes see the magic clinging to Enderman. It struck an uncomfortable, familiar chord in Scar as if he had seen Grian wear something similar to Zedaf's mask before. I have a bit of magic. It's the same type as Zedaf's, and that reacts with the mask to make it work. So, something Ender-related? Scar hazarded a guess. He received a nod from Zedaf. So, what are you seeing, Grian? I hate looking through this thing. Rude. But I can see our connection now, Grian continued. He ducked his wings behind him as he circled around them, looking from every side. I wasn't able to see it through admin overlays, and we're in hardcore, but Zedaf's not. And he's connected to Doc. Zedaf smiled brightly. Yep, Doc and I have confirmed that injuries are not shared when one person is disconnected from VR. There's some part of it on YouTube that is, like, latched? Grian turned from Scar and Mumbo to Zedaf. It's unlatched on you, the hardcore trigger. Zedaf nodded, bouncing on his hooves. And it's triggered by... He gestured for Grian to answer, but received a blank mask stare instead. By what? Proximity! Zedaf shouted, making Mumbo jump. The Ramling didn't seem to notice, hopping in a bouncy type of excited pacing. It latches on when you get close to your soulmate, switching you into hardcore. That's my theory anyway. Doc and I have decided to coordinate our moves anytime we leave our bases, regardless of if I have proof, or if we have proof yet. Grian nodded. Mumbo's base is right next to mine, and it must have switched into hardcore within minutes of logging back in, around when I went to talk to him. Scar tried to tell me about the situation that night. Scar found himself stepping forward and reaching for the mask, simultaneously wanting to know why it looked so wrong on his friend and curious to know if he could see anything through it. He had plenty of magic, so maybe it would react with the mask the same it did for Zedaf and Grian. It wasn't Grian who stopped him, but Zedaf. The Ramling lowered Scar's arm. There's too much information for me to understand anything else, Grian admitted, taking the mask off. For a moment, Scar could imagine that his skin looked red where it had been. Zedaf was quick to take the mask back. We can see the soulmate connections, but we can't see why it's there, Grian continued, eyes lowered in thought. There's bits of our magic spread across each other, and that's from the soulmate connection and Mumbo's soul deal, but I can't tell if it's just on the surface level or if it's going to affect us deeper. That sounds concerning, Mumbo said. What kind of magic did you say you had, Grian? Grian, do you remember when you first joined Hermitcraft? Scar interrupted, right at the start of Season 6 when X asked me to put an illusion on you? Yeah, why? Grian didn't look at him. The mask. Scar's words died in his throat. He'd never been told the backstory and had cast the illusion without question back then. I remember the injury you asked me to cover up. Grian's eyes snapped back to him before falling again, looking to the mask in Zedaf's hands. Oh, yeah, magic stuff. Didn't work right on me, he said, like he was dismissing it as nothing. It's why I ended up breaking my mask. Scar nodded. Anyway, I think the data we gathered here was quite valuable. Zedaf stowed his mask back in his inventory. A little more information on the hardcore aspect, inheriting magic spilling over to soulmates, and the three of you, Mumbo included. I had no idea there was a soulmate trio in all of this. Oh, Scar, your comm's doing the thing again. Scar checked and found his communicator flashing. This time, without the beeping. So it wasn't an absolute emergency. Regardless, the messages on the screen looked urgent. Shoot, you're right. I'll find you guys later, but I need to go take care of this real quick. Zedaf and Grian exchanged glances, but neither tried to delay his exit. No hanging around any unintentional mob farms, Grian cautioned him, tossing him another totem. And keep that in your hand at all times, okay? You be careful too, Scar threw back before launching into the air. His arms were full of a mess of rockets and totems and his cane, but he managed to juggle it all and fire off enough rockets to escape the Hole of Fame and put away his cane. Once he had smoothed out his flight, Scar checked his communicator again. He sifted through the alerts and most recent messages. Alert. Camera feed corrupted. Please move to safety. Alert. Camera feed corrupted. Please move to safety. Alert. Camera feed corrupted. Please move to safety. Azuma void to good time with Scar. Where are you? Are you okay? Alert. Camera feed corrupted. Please move to safety. Azuma void to good time with Scar. They lost sight of you. Please respond. Scar winced. He always felt guilty when these false alerts made everyone panic about him. He wasted no time sending a voice chat request, which was quickly answered. False alert, X, Scar started, and with getting that concern out of the way, I'm fine. Flying over to the shopping district now. The cameras should be able to pick me up better there. He had to hold his wrist up to his ear to hear Azuma. That's a relief. Where are you? Zedaf's base. There's a known problem with his bases, right? I popped a totem which set off the first alert. Then I stuck around with Mumbo and Grian to talk to Zedaf for a bit. He heard Azuma sigh over the voice call. I'll come meet you at the shopping district, but at least it wasn't anything serious. Yes, I'm glad Grian took my advice and talked to Zedaf. X, do you... Scar's voice stopped. He wanted to ask about Grian, about how he'd arrived in Hermitcraft at the start of a new season with scratches and burns on his face. What happened when Mumbo disappeared from the server only to return a week later with a new hermit. But it was that respect between hermits that stopped him from asking. Scar was curious, sure, but he didn't want to have to go behind Grian's back for answers. It felt like betraying his soulmate to do that. It felt like betraying a hermit. Even if he asked, Azuma would probably see the situation the same way. Grian had acted shifty when he brought up the topic at Zedaf's base. Maybe it just wasn't a good time for that conversation. Maybe Grian would tell him in his own time, when he was ready. Azuma's voice startled Scar from his thoughts. Scar? Never mind. I'm nearly at the shopping district. See you there. Scar ended the call.